Hello, everybody. Hannah Sabramwitz here. Hope you're having a fabulous July 1st. Happy Canada Day to my Canadian pa- uh, people. I was going to say like citizens or something. It's so bad. All right. Two things I want to talk to you about today. Of course, it is scenario related, but scenarios are a quirky beast. One of the things that I realize, and I think that I already knew this, but now when you're trying to teach other people how to do scenarios, you realize there are so many pieces that make it make these difficult. And not that I'm saying that it's impossible. It isn't. It's actually something that once you craft, once you get good at this, this is a craft you can take with you anywhere. Designing great scenarios is, and if you watch my training at scenariodesignSecrets.com, I have basically a little mini recorded webinar where I walk you through kind of my discovery and the models that I use in the companies that I've worked with. And I've worked with all kinds of companies. And I don't say that I've worked with all those companies because I want to brag to people, because that doesn't matter. Like, who I've worked with doesn't matter. The reason I mention all those different companies is that people go, oh, look, Sony. Oh, look, Adidas. Oh, look, ABB. Oh, look, Norwegian Refugee Council. You see those, you hear those names and you think, wait a minute, Anna's been able to use the same thing in all these different places. They all do different things. And I'm not saying that you should do the same thing, that you should go out and basically work with a whole bunch of different organizations, because to be honest with you, the more focused you are and the more focused you are in delivering targeted services to your clients, the more you become a specialist, right? And the more you become a specialist, the more quickly you're able to solve those problems, the more you can start charging on value versus piecemeal pieces, right? You now have a service and a product that's a package, instead of going, how much is this going to cost per hour, or how much are you going to deliver it? You can actually say, here's some of the problems I've solved in this industry. Look at the problem I can solve for you. Here's how much value it's going to bring to you. Now I'm going to show you how much to actually charge. So those are things that you have to start getting really focused on. So the reason I tell you all the different industries and all the different places I've worked with is to show you that this model can work for you. A lot of people talk to me, they'll email me, they'll say, Anna, I love what you talk about every day, but scenarios won't work for my industry. We're different. No. A scenario is a scenario is a scenario. What changes from one to the next is context, right? So those are the things that are difficult to discover unless you give it a chance, unless you talk to subject matter experts and practitioners in the field. Now, the one thing I wanted to talk about today is the difference between a case study and a scenario, because I think that a lot of the people that we talk to, and we actually, when you talk to a subject matter expert, or you talk to a stakeholder, or you talk to project managers, you talk to basically everybody else who's involved in your team, you'll say scenario, and they think case study, and there's a difference between the two. Now, am I saying that I am the be-all, end-all definition maker of the terms? Probably not. You probably go on YouTube and you'll find 25 different definitions of what a scenario is, of what a case study is. That's cool. I'm just going to tell you what I think it is, and how I, in my mind, have drawn the difference, so that when I talk about these things, hopefully you're like, yeah, that makes sense, Anna. So far, let's go along with this, and this is a definition. So the difference between a scenario and a case study is, most people think a scenario is the same as a case study, right? Now, a case study is basically you looking at a reading. It's usually a couple of pages long of like basically somebody's like journey. It's the de facto finished piece of what all the decisions they made, all the obstacles that came about. It's if anything, it's a very detailed story about somebody's beginning and end and how they got there. So a case study could be like somebody starting a business and then in 5 years having a successful business, all the things they did in order to get there. Now, a scenario, so a lot of people think that's a scenario, but it's not. In my mind, the scenario is the same thing, except every time that person comes to a point where they have to make a decision, whether it is to, let's say we're still talking about the business owner, Are you going to invest in new hardware for your store, or are you going to invest in more training for your staff? What's more important right now? And where those decisions fall in is what makes a great scenario, is that I'm giving the learner agency to make decisions about where, when a decision happens, is it the right decision for this time? And is it the right decision, period, right? So those are, and the other thing with a case study has a fairly finite end, right? It's like, when I say finite end, that's kind of like the same thing. There's a conclusion that they cannot influence. With a scenario, I am able to influence the outcome. And that's what's awesome, because with a case study, I'm just reading the story of a person. With a scenario, I'm able to influence the story of that person. So the story still happens. The story still takes place. The decisions are all still being made. However, it's almost like there's a parallel universe, and I'm able to influence the outcome. And that makes, in my opinion, my humble opinion, not so humble, a better lesson, right? When I am able to influence those decisions, it's a better lesson. And hello, thank you for joining me. Hi. So that when you talk about scenarios to people, make sure that they understand that you're not talking about case studies. Oh, you're Tunisia. Thank you so much for joining. That's fantastic. That's far away. That's awesome. So really have to make sure that people understand what you're supposed to be when you're designing a scenario versus a case study, is that your intent is always to put the learner in a place of where they're not directing the entire story. The story is yours to tell. The character is yours to design. But you're giving them agency. You're giving them the power to influence, to see which outcome they get to see at the end. Those outcomes are predetermined. You have already designed them. However, the learner gets to see which one they get to through their decisions. And that's the super fun part, right? Now, the other thing that I was just reading about, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit, because I think that a lot of us, listen, I talk about working with subject matter experts all the time. And there's no way that you can be in this business if you don't talk to experts. You can't design learning experiences for any industry, except maybe your own, without talking to an expert. However, the problem with talking to experts is that they're experts. And when experts are experts, that means that all of the learning that they've done, which sometimes happened for some people, like let's say you're trying to capture some sort of leadership style for somebody who's been at a company for 20 years. Let's say like they're like the guy who's now leaving and retiring, and you're trying to capture the deep smarts in his brains. Well, it's going to be very hard unless this guy's been like mentoring and coaching and being a reflective learner all his life. It's going to be very hard for you to unpack that, whatever he's smushed into a single step of leadership. It's going to be very hard to unpack what it takes for somebody to get from being here, not a leader, to here, a leader. That transformation, right? So one of the things that I always say is you definitely need to work with an expert so they can give you that big picture, 30,000 foot view guidance. But then to get the context for your stories, your scenarios, and those decision points, you have to start talking to practitioners in the field, and it's even better if they're newer practitioners. Because here's what happens, friends. When you're an expert in any field, hi Piotr, nice to see you. When you're an expert in any field, there are several things that start happening in your brain. One is you start amalgamating different pieces of a process. You start smushing them into smaller and smaller skill sets, and they become a single entity, even though that skill is now combined of 10 different things for a novice. For that person now, it is a single event. So I always give this example because I recently learned to drive, and somebody told me, okay, well, back out of the driveway. And for them, backing out of the driveway is a single action. For me, backing out of the driveway is 22 different actions, which is check both mirrors, check the rear view, put my hand like this over the thing, put this, oh yeah, I got to put this in reverse. Now I got to put my hand back, look back, do a 360. It's all those things. So when somebody who is not used to being a teacher or not used to being a mentor tells you back out of the driveway and they think it's a single action, it's because they've taken all of those steps and compressed them now into an automatic behavior. That's what we're working with every day when we're working with an expert, right? Like that gets really difficult. Now, the other thing that I've learned is that chemically, that person has also been modified. So what happens is, and this has actually been tested, and it's actually pretty scary because it messes up our own ability to actually extract information from experts because they're not necessarily able to explain the steps that they take to either make a good decision, be a good leader, whatever it is. They've been honing their craft for so long that they've become almost a pattern recognition machine. And because they've become a pattern recognition machine, what happens is they are no longer conscious of the things that they do and the reasons that they do them for and the cues that they pick up in their environment that help them make those decisions. So the study that was done was on, basically it was trying to test how we recognize patterns and how we, let's say somebody, there are people who are, let's say, really good at, let's say they'll walk into a room and they'll know exactly, if it's a danger, if there's danger in that room, like let's say they're like an FBI agent, they'll be able to look at a situation and they know exactly if it's like a dangerous situation, or if it's somebody who's on a call, they'll know exactly if that call is going to go well or if it's not, based on what they hear. They won't be able to tell you exactly what that detail is because our brain is a pattern-seeking machine, and what it'll do is it'll pick up little nuances in the environment, test them against the environment. If it's the right prediction, if the prediction is made right, then it reinforces a pattern in our brain, which releases a certain chemical, which then is reinforced the next time we make the prediction again in the correct way. So the challenge is that if your expert has done enough of that practice and gotten enough of those feedback loops back in the back of the brain saying, we made a prediction and now it's working, we are right, this pattern is true, you no longer recognize the pattern. So for me to say, hey, why did you do that in this situation? Or what gave you the indication that this was a dangerous situation? Or can you tell me, what made you think that? In most cases, when an expert who's been an expert for a long time tells you what it is, it's probably not true. They're trying to rationalize the fact that their brain has automatic intuition now built in, patterns built in, and they're trying to rationalize how that is now happening and why. And I doubt that's actually the reason. So what also happens is, there was another point that really actually was really useful. Anyways, the whole idea is that, we're always, when we're designing scenarios, what we're trying to do is create a scenario that's very meaningful to the learner and represents not only the ideas that they would have in solving it properly, but also the common mistakes that the assumptions that people have, the mistakes that they would make that would make them actually choose the wrong thing, right? So that's actually quite hard for somebody who has been practicing something the right way for a very long time for them to come up with a reason why somebody would mess up. In fact, because our brains are learning machines, what we end up doing, and thank you for commenting, Latrec. It's actually true. The set and predict. What happens is, because you're a learning machine, you will fail. Recognize that as a failure. That's a pattern you won't repeat again, and you'll try a different course. Try it again, fail. Okay, that didn't work. Try it again. Okay, this worked. So what happens is, now you've recognized this pattern. You no longer care about the other failures. You may, maybe reflect on them once in a while, but you don't think about the errors anymore. You already have a pattern down. Why in the world would you focus on the errors? You don't. You already know the right thing to do, right? So if I talk to somebody who's been doing the right thing for the past decade, they can't necessarily think of the things that went wrong. They can't think of the mistakes and failures. So there's a very crucial way to use experts. Experts are great at telling you the right way, but they're not necessarily good at telling you the alternatives that a novice would make. Therefore, guess who you have to talk to? The novice. So you have to talk to an expert to get the 30,000-foot view. Look at what perfect performance looks like. Look at the things that somebody's now doing. Look at what they're doing. Look at, what does that performance look like, right? Because you get to observe it. It's really cool if you get to observe it without, sometimes people can't even tell you. You have to actually watch them, and you can say, look at them, right? And then you have to talk to somebody who is a new practitioner, who still remembers the faults, who still remembers their errors in judgment, who still remembers where they messed up, because those are the things you're going to use to give the B and C and D. Right? Those are the things you're going to use to create those bad consequences. So when you're working with an expert, realize that they're going to be one part of the puzzle, but there's going to be other people you need to include, and you don't have to make this a big project, but you do need to talk to people who just recently became top performers, who just recently became experts, so that you can say, hey, when you were learning this, what was the first thing you messed up on? Why did you make that decision? They'll still be able to tell you because it's fresh in their minds. 5 years from now, probably not, unless they're like the kind of person who always thinks about why they did something and write it down in a journal, which most people don't. When you're trying to get good at something, you're just trying to get good at something, right? So realize that this is a limitation, and it's not something that somebody does on purpose. It's because our brains are efficient and we're trying to make as many things automatic as possible. Realize that person is probably not going to be able to articulate what you need to create a good learning experience. They're going to be only able to give you a part of it. And then find the other people, the new people, the novices, the whoever it is, to fill in those other gaps so that you can create a full picture, a picture of the expert and the practitioner who's trying to become the expert. How does that work? And what's that journey? And so that will definitely, I think, help you. And it has definitely helped me. I've found that both complement each other, but you can't rely on one too much because, especially the expert, because they're in a different level, right? So I hope that was helpful for you guys. And also, as I said, always remember that when you're talking about scenarios, you have to clarify that somebody understands that scenarios are about giving somebody the choices to make a decision and direct the outcome, which has been predetermined, but they get to choose the path that they get to get there. And a case study is a de facto, here's what happened, what do you think about that? And maybe in some case studies, what happens is you get basically the entire story, and somebody can say, okay, where did they mess up? But to me, that's not as compelling as being in the moment and making those decisions. Both have a place, but make sure you make a distinction between what is one and versus another. And Lautrec said, experts and practitioners need to go hand in hand in parallel. One completes the other. You're absolutely true. You need both because each has a very good perspective on your learning. And therefore you need both of their ideas and input. And then even after you've talked to both of these people, you still need one more person's input, or two or three, and that is the person who you're going to be teaching this to. So your target end user, get them to go through it to see if it resonates with them, if they connect with your story, if they connect with the language you're using. Because a lot of times what happens is the novice, they use a different language than the expert, right? And so you have to start connecting those two so that it's actually closer to where the novice is versus where the expert is, if it helps them make that journey. So there's a lot of little adjustments that we have to make to continue making that experience better for the end user, right? So a lot of fun. I know you guys are into this because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, huh? But also that this quality stuff, to make something that means something to people, that really resonates with them, it takes work. Takes effort, right? It's not a software solution. It really is about you thinking and talking to people, and then using your expertise to refine that story and make sure that it achieves that outcome. And it's funny because we were just working today through something with a student who's designing his own scenario with a story. And the hardest thing for him right now is he has so many of these ideas and story things, but he's going to have to let go of a lot of that and just distill it to the most powerful story with the most powerful decisions ever, right? So that it makes the most impact, but doesn't drag on too long so that people lose focus and momentum. So sometimes the hardest thing, as they say, is not what to keep, but what to throw away is the hardest thing. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for sticking with me and commenting from Tunisia. Love it. I'm loving it. That's great. Spread the word. Scenarios. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and I'll probably see you here tomorrow. All right. If you have any questions about anything, please post them in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, then share it with people who would enjoy seeing it as well. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Take care. Thanks. Bye.